Last night, the sky over Jerusalem brought a scene no one expected. It wasn't fireworks or drones. Crosses of light hovered, and from them rose pillars that cut across the silhouette of the old city. Then a sound, a deep, metallic, drawn-out boom, like a distant trumpet. Cameras recorded it, hundreds saw it. Some cried, others knelt. Many stood still, trying to understand. Was it the atmosphere, a trick of the light, or an echo of the warning in Luke 21, which talks about signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars? The spot seemed to line up with the Mount of Olives, a place so many promises point to, and the question wouldn't go away. What if this isn't just a rare phenomenon? What if we're on the threshold of something bigger, a call that cuts through the night and reaches us? While the crosses ruled the eastern sky, another story was taking shape far from Jerusalem's hills. No temple, no altar, no crowd. Just a patch of land in the Michigan countryside and a woman in silence. Grief had filled her home for weeks since her husband's passing. That morning she went out not to look for a miracle but to breathe. She needed a minute without the weight of absence, a step outside the walls that reminded her of everything. The sky was still dark, the wind was low. She lifted her eyes with no expectations, and something broke the silence. When the sun was just starting to rise, she lifted her eyes. In the silence of the first light, something stood out above the horizon, a sharp cross, cut out by a veil of mist and golden brightness, as if it didn't belong to the ordinary world. She stood still. For a few moments she just looked. There was no wind, no bird song, only the figure hanging in stillness. Her hands shook as she raised her phone, not to prove anything but to keep what her heart already knew. She had seen something holy. The image didn't stay there. In no time it crossed borders and reached far beyond Michigan, touching people who would never meet. And it didn't stop there. Suddenly, other scenes started to appear. Different places, different skies, the same persistent shape. Crosses drawn in clouds over the ruins of old churches. Beams of light cutting through storms on the Mount of Olives. A glow resting on the waters of Galilee. What stood out most wasn't the light, it was the timing. These signs were showing up on holy days, on Resurrection Sunday, on the Feast of Trumpets, on the eve of Pentecost. They didn't hover over empty places either. They settled over territories marked by ancient encounters with God. Some called it a trick of the air. Scientists talked about ice halos, solar refraction, predictable phenomena. Even so, the question hung in the air. Why right there and why right then? For many, the answers sounded hollow. What stayed wasn't the picture in the sky, but what it sparked inside. Those who saw those signs talk about an inner stirring, a tightness in the chest, a new kind of quiet, the clear feeling of being under a gaze. Some people fell to their knees. Some cried without knowing why. One of them summed it up in a whisper. I didn't just see a cross, I felt it calling me. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something that seemed to pass through the veil from above, not to condemn, but to wake us up. And maybe that's the message. The book of Joel announces wonders in the heavens and signs on the earth before the great day of the Lord. It doesn't say they only come in fire. Some arrive gently like a wind that passes and leaves a trace. There are signs that don't come to scare, but to prepare. Maybe these crosses are invitations, a call back, a reminder of who we are and who we belong to. While the world tried to explain it, another scene was forming, even harder to ignore. Not far off, not filtered through lenses, but right there, hovering over the mountain. The same mountain where the Messiah was. The Mount of Olives holds stories. There, prophecies echoed. There, betrayal and prayer, tears and victory mixed. From there, Jesus looked at the valley and wept for the temple. From there, he ascended to heaven, leaving in the dust more than footprints, a promise that didn't fade. And that maybe is being remembered now in a way no one expected. They said he would return the same way he left. And that late afternoon, something started to stir again. As the sun sank behind the hills west of Jerusalem, a small group gathered by the ancient olive trees. Pilgrims were ending their walk with a final prayer. Locals passed by out of habit or because of a pull they couldn't name. Then, without warning, the sky changed. It wasn't a storm. There was no thunder. But a movement ran over the treetops. Just above the highest branches hovered a figure wrapped in white. It didn't burst with a flash. It gave off a steady light, as if it came from within, a flame that doesn't burn. It had a human form, but it didn't obey gravity or cast a shadow like everything else. The arms open, not as a sign of dominance but of welcome. From the open sky, a dove came down. It circled and landed unafraid on the figure's shoulder. Nobody screamed. The dirt square went quiet, phones lowered. Words died before they came out. One of the witnesses would say later that even the wind went still. It felt like the earth itself was leaning in, and it didn't stop there. Around the central light, other presences began to appear, tall, silent, robes shifting like liquid metal. They weren't huddled together. They took their places like those who guard a threshold. They didn't say a word, but everyone knew. There was order in that presence, a soundless summons. Those who were there understood that this was only the beginning. They weren't effects or a drone mirage or a whim. They were envoys, guardians of something holy. For many, the scene sounded like an echo of Revelation 19:14, armies of heaven in fine white linen following the one who leads. It wasn't art, it wasn't a trick, it was presence, dense like the silence before the word. Then came the attempts to take the story apart, collective suggestion, hallucination, projection on the mist. But the accounts line up, repeat details without coordinating versions, and leave a tone of reverence that's hard to imitate. A woman said her soul was shaken out of its torpor. A man who said he had no faith simply murmured, "Now I believe." It wasn't hysteria, it was an encounter. And then there's the place, the Mount of Olives, the same spot where, according to Acts 1, 2 messengers said he would return the way he went up. The same Mount of Zechariah 14:4, when it will split at the Lord's touch. Coincidence? Could be. Symbol? That too. But it's a symbol that speaks with its own voice, a voice that doesn't whisper, it summons. That summons stitches past and present together. It reignites ancient promises and makes us remember recent signs. The unlikely turnaround of the 6-Day War, when the map looked sealed shut and yet a crack opened. To grasp the spiritual weight of what now hangs over Jerusalem, you have to look back to that moment when Israel's survival looked like a thin line, and ask what's being said today here in front of us, before the next step happens. June 1967. Israel wakes up surrounded by armies promising to wipe it off the map. Fewer men, weapons, and planes, maps with arrows from every side, and the expectation of a defeat many already took for granted. The country mobilizes what it has and braces for the worst. But when the engines start and the columns roll, the script changes. In 6 days, something unexpected happens. The borders hold, the enemy pulls back, and Jerusalem, split for decades, returns to the center of the story. Reports from the other side speak of hesitation, crossed orders, tanks stopped with no explanation. Prisoners report fear, as if an invisible barrier kept them from moving forward. An Egyptian soldier, under questioning, says he saw tall figures dressed in white blocking the way. Some units drop their rifles without firing. Others fall back before the first shot echoes. On the Israeli side, whispered accounts start circulating between trenches and shelters. Hands that supposedly guided steps in the dark. Voices warning about ambushes. A sudden mist covering critical movements. For many, it wasn't just tactics and luck. Michael's name, the archangel mentioned in the book of Daniel as Israel's guardian, starts making the rounds among the soldiers again. Had he risen again alongside the troops? Between maps, radios, and smoke, the question crosses the front line and reaches the streets, keeping alive the idea that in those 6 days, something beyond the visible also joined the fight. Years later, when Ezer Weitzman, who would go on to preside over Israel and had commanded troops in the war, was pressed to explain a victory as swift as it was unlikely, he answered with 4 words: the finger of God. It wasn't an empty metaphor. It was the admission that something slipped past the reach of tanks, maps, and calculations. In the same vein, many started to interpret a phenomenon that showed up around the world. First, a distant low murmur, like an old bugle on the horizon. Then clearer sequences hard to ignore. In Kiev, Jerusalem, Berlin, Chicago, phones recorded metallic bursts that seemed to hang over the rooftops. For some, harmonies. For others, long roars with no kinship to wind, factories, or aircraft. In Jerusalem, reports multiplied. Nights when residents jolted awake to tones that sounded like trumpets. No construction, airports, or storms. Just the sonic trace of something ancient, insistent. A rabbi from the old city summed it up. It sounded like the walls of Jericho right before they gave way. That comparison caught on among those who read signs. In the book of Revelation, 7 trumpets mark decisive stages of the end times. The last announces a turning point. Between the memory of war and these echoes from the sky, many see the same thread. What do we do with these signs? There's an ancient announcement that still echoes. In the book of Revelation 11:15, the kingdoms of the world come to belong to the Lord and his Christ, and the reign has no end. Given that, a question keeps pressing. Could the strange sounds so many people have recorded be a prelude? A trumpet call not born of human lips but of messengers from above? Skeptics rush to the board of causes. Shifting tectonic plates, sudden swings in atmospheric pressure, electromagnetic interference. Others point to military tests and underground works. All plausible, all verifiable. Even so, one trait persists in the reports. These sounds show up at moments of spiritual impact. There are visions, unusual lights, a sense of presence that takes over the whole body. Those who hear it usually sum it up the same way. I felt it in my soul. And that carries weight. Because it's not just the noise that stirs people, it's the message underneath it. A vibration that doesn't aim at the eardrum, it aims at the heart. Are we hearing the first notes of a divine symphony? Are these calls announcing the return of a king? Science doesn't shut the door on mystery, but it tries to describe it. Shifts can generate long, echoing booms. Changes in the air produce whistles with fuzzy origins. And there are light phenomena, sundogs, lenticular clouds, that paint skies that look like signs. Even so, the question still stands. What if it's not just sound? What if it's a voice, calling creation to attention? Coordinated swarms of drones and holographic projections can already draw shapes in the sky with precision. After all, in just a few decades, we've learned to bend light and sound and program experiences that fool the senses. Even so, something slips past the screens. The effect certain events have on those who witness them. It's not just the flash or the boom. It's the exact sequence, the timing, the symbolic coherence, the feeling that something touches a person's center. Experts offer partial answers, but stumble when they try to assemble the whole picture. You can forge a beam of light. You can simulate a heavenly choir. You can't manufacture the sudden clarity of a soul waking up. And that hesitation isn't just among religious folks. Researchers who shy away from mysticism have already cautiously logged events that fall outside the lab's usual playbook. In those gaps, old wagers are reborn. Secret technology, intelligences from elsewhere, collective hallucinations, hidden satellites, experiments with shadows. Hypotheses useful for pieces of the puzzle, unable to account for the decisive trait. What the signs leave behind after they pass. It isn't confusion, it's clarity. It isn't delusion, it's conviction. It doesn't push away, it awakens. Maybe we're crossing a threshold when the fabric between the natural and the supernatural gets thin enough to let a breath through. Science and spirit, for a moment, face the same sky. And when the wind shifts, there are those who swear they hear an ancient call, Revelation and the seventh trumpet. For centuries, scholars and pilgrims have opened the book of Revelation, looking for clues about the final turn of history and the sign that ends heaven's wait. In chapter 11, verse 15, a statement comes that leaves no room for doubt. When the seventh trumpet sounds, the kingdoms of the earth belong to the Lord and to his Christ, and his reign will never end. It's not a comforting metaphor. It's the announcement of a real change in authority. The seventh trumpet doesn't play backstage. It's a public summons that cuts through the spiritual realm and reaches the material world. When it sounds, it's not a hunch, it's fulfillment. Now face the possibility. If trumpet sounds have echoed in different places, if the sky over Jerusalem now and then opens with signs that look like the ancient pages, isn't it fair to ask if we're getting close to that last call? And what if we're not looking at a distant myth, but a present that's closing in? If that's the case, the signs stop being curiosities and become warnings. Warnings call for a response. And the question that remains is direct. Is the time left shorter than we think? Because if the countdown has already begun, Every new sound, every new sign may not be random noise, but the cue that gets the world ready for the next act. Some expect a discreet return, almost a whisper, as if Jesus would slip into the world through a side door without any fuss. Scripture, however, tells another story. Revelation 1:7 is direct. Every eye will see him. There won't be secrets nor local appearances that only a few witness. It will be an open, sweeping event, impossible to mistake. He will not come again as a baby in a manger, nor grow up quietly among us. He will descend in glory, accompanied by heavenly armies. Matthew 24:30 announces the sign of the Son of Man in the sky, coming on the clouds with power and great glory. That's the language of a public event, not a rumor. Creation itself will respond, skies darkening, mountains shaken, stars losing their shine. It will be the moment that interrupts history's routine and launches eternity. And before that climax, signs stack up, trumpets, radiant crosses, the expectation on the Mount of Olives. They aren't passing fantasies, they're rehearsals for something greater. If these signs seem to be gaining in number, intensity, and rhythm, what does that tell us about how near that day is? In every generation, warnings have been given. In every generation, many turned their faces away. Today, with reports spreading, videos circulating, and debates among believers and scientists, we go on distracted. Are we alert or asleep? The question isn't whether he will come, but whether we'll be awake when the sky opens. They call it coincidence. People laugh at the sounds many describe as trumpets. They claim it's fake, filtered, manufactured. But Scripture had already anticipated that reaction. In 2 Peter 3:3-4, we read that in the last days there would be mockers asking, "Where is the promise of his coming?" Like those who live certain that tomorrow always comes. Jesus warned as well. In Matthew 24:38, he points back to the days before the flood. People eating, drinking, marrying, working, busy, distracted, until the water arrived suddenly. And while many treat these reports as noise, the Word says God doesn't miss a thing. Psalm 121:4 says, "The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps." Maybe then these signs, visions, and voices in the sky aren't distant echoes, but a wake-up call. Not to terrorize, but to pull a world drowned in notifications and noise out of its stupor. If it were all just chance, why does the message keep coming back? Why do so many in different places report the same thing? Skepticism has its place, but indifference can be costly. They don't show up to entertain, they show up to wake us up. They rip through the fog of indifference, cut through the long pause of delay, and call us plainly to repentance. Before the door closes, before the sky opens, before the King returns, signs rise over Jerusalem and over the whole earth. Crosses that shimmer, hosts lining up, trumpets sounding from above. They aren't tricks or mirages, they're invitations. The sky isn't just a backdrop of clouds and stars. It's a stage for messages written in light and sound for anyone willing to see and hear. Maybe these moments don't come to paralyze us with fear, but to train us. Not to produce fear, but urgency. Not to crush, but to ignite hope. If Christ came now, if the heavens were torn open and the King of Glory came down, would you recognize him? Would you run to meet him or look for a hiding place? Would your heart be open or hardened? The question keeps pounding as the horizon speaks. Psalm 19:1 sums up what the signs repeat day after day. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims the work of his hands. Every flash that cuts through the night seems to repeat the same call. Wake up, return, get ready. Not out of panic, but out of love. Not from pressure, but as a response. And as the sound echoes, every beat of the heart becomes a possible step toward the return. Thanks for walking with me so far. If this message touched you, hit like, share it with someone, and comment, "I want to be ready." That helps get this word to those who need it. In the next chapter, we'll take practical steps to keep the heart awake and full of hope. Until then, keep a simple question on your heart. If the King returns, how will he find me? Peace to you, and see you soon.